Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program, version 1.2.2, in which I am attempting to make Kerbals a multiplanetary species. And now we are actually getting to that objective because we have here something that I sent a very, very long time ago. But this is the Duna ComNet satellite that I am sending out to Duna to deploy all these little satellites to instantly create a whole communications network around Duna, because I know we're going to need a lot of communications to actually be able to talk to each other, to get coverage over all parts of the planet, and also Ike, the moon of Duna. So we have a 15 gigameter relay antenna, and then some big 15 gigameter communitrons here on the side for direct communications back home, which I'm pretty sure is enough to make these calls home. It's not actually great now that I'm thinking about it. What actually is talking to home right now? Everything says that it's idle. Okay, so taking a look at this, we can see underneath all the mess here, eeny, meeny, miny, which one is it? There. You can almost sort of kind of see it. There you go. Duna has a apoapsis of about 20 gigameters over the sun, and Kerbin has about a 13 gigameter apoapsis over the sun. So at worst, they're going to be like, with Kerbin here and Duna out here, we're looking at a 35 gigameter difference. So the 15 gigameter antenna rating that is on here doesn't actually reflect the deep space network that is affected by the upgrades to your tracking station. So this RA15 actually is able to communicate up to 61.2 gigameters away, which is going to keep it in communication with Kerbin at all times, period, bar none. There's no amount of distance that Kerbin and Duna are ever going to be further away than that 35 gigameters, which is pretty great. And then these individual smaller antennas are 22.4, and so usually they're going to be able to communicate directly from Duna to Kerbin, except for when things get really out of range, and then they're going to have to rely on the big relay antenna here. And their individual communitrons, like these data transmitters here, these side dishes, can communicate directly, except for when things are at opposition. So that's what the plan is for this ComSat network. We are going to use this to handle all of our communications and make sure we have as excellent of coverage as we can possibly get. First things first, we are going to get this into its final intended orbit, where I would like to have a polar orbit around Duna with the mothership that is outside of the orbit of Ike. And so we're going to do that at about a 5 million meter apoapsis over Duna. And then we are going to circularize, and then it'll be a nice circular orbit that you can see. Periapsis circularize is outside of the orbit and is never going to touch or be perturbed, and that should hopefully make sure that it is always it is rarely occluded by Duna or Ike in its communications with Kerbin, because this is going to be kind of the mother satellite that deals with everything else. So we're going to get this into that orbit, and we are going to make this change way out here so that the other smaller satellites can get out and away on their own power. So just a couple more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, burn. Just a very small correction to get this into its final intended orbit. So let's see, what would be the best way? Let's plan out what we're going to do first things first. So we're going to have this master satellite that is going to be in high orbit around Duna. So we're going to want to have 2 more that are in probably opposite orbits that are relatively low around Duna. Maybe 2 around Ike. I'm not sure if we need 2 around Ike. Maybe we do like the L1, L2 kind of thing where we have them chasing after Ike so that they, provide full coverage on either side. That's a little dicey to set up, but that shouldn't be too hard. But yeah, we're going to want to have them, we're going to want to have two that are roughly at the same orbital period at opposite ends of that orbit so that they maintain 100% coverage. Alternatively, I could do 3 in kind of a triangle formation out in the orbit of Duna to make sure I always have coverage around that, and then I just have one polar satellite around Ike to provide dark side coverage, or maybe even like equatorial on the plane to provide coverage this way half of the time, basically. So yeah, lots of options that we can do with 4 satellites. All right, so let's pop off our first one. Come on now. All right, there you go. Extend that antenna. Everything's looking good. Go ahead and activate your little ant engine, which is all you need because this is just a tiny little thing, and it has about 2,000 meters per second of delta V. And we have 4 of these. I think what I would like to do is have 2 equatorial satellites for communications in either direction. And so I'm going to put this just outside of, or just inside of the orbit of Ike. And let's see, Ike is at 3 million meters, so let's go up to about, let's see, where does that touch? And can I, at this point, if I circularize, okay, so that's never going to get close enough, I don't think, to touch, and that is at 1 point. Let's bring it down just a little bit. Whoops, other way. And let's make it a nice even 1.25 million meters. Just arbitrarily. 1.245, that seems fine. And I'm going to want 2 to be in roughly this position at 0 degrees inclination, ideally, at 1.25 million meters, and then I will try to get them into in orbit with the exact same period, but at opposite ends, so that they are covering the entirety of the planet. And I'm going to do the same thing with Ike. And then we're going to have those 2 on either side, and then we're going to have the mothership overhead, plus any other extra stages that we bring along. All right, so that's 2 at that entry profile. Let me just rename this one. The difficult part is going to be getting all these circularized, because they're all going to come in kind of at once. Okay, so we have 2 more that I would like to put into orbit around Ike, so let's go ahead and get them disconnected. Yeah, I'm becoming increasingly concerned that this is going to be highly problematic when I'm trying to actually get them to, when I'm actually trying to get all of these into orbit at the same time, but that'll be a problem for future Justin. Okay, so Ike is pretty big. I'm not sure if it's actually quite the size of Kerbin's moon. That's Duna. Focus on Ike. Gravity 0.11. So no, it's not quite as big as Kerbin's moon, but it's still relatively heavy, and it has a fairly large sphere of influence. So it's actually fairly easy to get into an encounter with it because it's perfectly equatorial with Duna, which allows it to do some kind of cool things, I think. So let's just bring this on down, and then we'll see where it is going to be at during this encounter. Looks like over there. So, I think I had it. Nope, not quite. Yeah, no, that is actually an encounter. It's just a really bad one. So let's not do that. There we go, something like this. So we're able to get, let's go ahead and focus on, oops, that was all that. Okay. Yeah, so about 243 kilometers periapsis. Let's see what is the maximum altitude I can have over Ike and still be inside. 630, we get up to about 750. That's pretty good. Do we want to do 750 or do we want to get it a little bit closer? Probably a little bit closer just to be as safe as possible, because one thing that I know happens a lot to me anyways is I will try to put something right on the edge of a sphere of influence and then it'll slip out and then it'll get hurtled off into the void, and that's just a big problem. So we are going to avoid that by bringing it down to about 600 kilometers instead of 750. And then if we have two of these, once again, in that are synchronous to each other, we should be able to get full coverage of everything in theory, which would be real cool, I think. All right, so we can delete that. We'll deal with that when we get to it, but we want to get this encounter pretty close to dead on if possible. What is the deal here? Is it just not close enough? There we go. Bring that in a little bit. There we go. And then we can correct from there. That's going to be about a 20 meter per second change. And then, ooh, that changed a lot. What just happened there? That was weird. Don't be weird. You're freaking me out. Can I actually get right into that 500? Ah, so good. So good. Okay, so 498, that's just about right. This is a pretty bad inclination, but we should be able to get that fixed on our way in. And if we circularize at this periapsis, that's going to cost us 750, so that's a grand total of less than half of our total Delta V budget. Very, very cool. Okay, so let's push this node out a little bit, because we're going to need to get this, we're going to need to tweak this a little bit again. Get that a little further ahead. Because since we're dealing with inclination changes and very minute maneuvers, then we are definitely going to need to be a little careful with how exactly we approach that. All right, so I kind of like this because it does cross the plane. If we do it like this, there's less time that we are actually crossing that. It pushes our ascending node to a point where it is further away from the body, which is good. But I want to actually be hitting that. It looks like that's actually perfect. Right here, it looks to me anyways, like our periapsis is right about at our ascending node, which is exactly what we're looking for. Or is it the descending node? I don't actually know the difference all that well. What is this? What is that? Delete that. Don't be weird. Okay, let me fix this once again. That's the problem. I had an extra maneuver in there somewhere. Okay, that's fine. I didn't actually know why that was changing, so I should have actually questioned why that was doing what it was doing, but that's fine. Everything's fine. This will work out, and we will be able to fix our orbit because we have tons of extra Delta V. And ooh, do I not actually have? Oh wow, I'm actually using a very old probe core, so I don't actually have the ability to target my maneuver node, but that's fine. We can do this old school style. All right, and just use that little ant engine because it's so very light. So very light, so very efficient. There we go. And that is, let's try to get this a little bit, there we go. Okay, cool. So I would like to actually get this one. Let's put this maneuver here, 16 days out. So that's a little extra time that we won't have to worry about it, which is good. And look at it go, zipping off and away from our from the mothership. Very nice. Okay, so we have one more. We're going to do basically the same exact thing and get it into a very similar orbit. All right, you are all alone there, mothership. Ready to do this on your own. And with no weird things, you know, weighing you down in odd angles. All right, so let's go ahead and activate this engine, and we're going to do the same exact thing we just did, so I may skip this. All right, then we are making this last burn to get ourselves into a very similar encounter with Duna and then Ike. 0.5, 0.4, easy now. And there we go, boom. All right, well, I don't see any reason why not to just continue forward and execute this mission. All of our Kerbals, I think, are doing very nicely out in their, what do you call it, in their various bases. The life support systems are all functioning just fine. Everything seems to be working out, so might as well just get this moving. All right, so this should be challenging, but yeah, we have a swarm of these, we have just a complete swarm of these probes coming into orbit, so we are going to see how we do as far as getting them into their appropriate orbits. What is happening here? Oh yes, 125, that's about what I'm looking for, so let's go ahead and periapse, circularize. I'm going to want to fix my inclination, and I'm not 100% sure where I can fix that, although it looks like it's pretty close to the, looks like it's pretty close here, so I should be able to do some work fixing my inclination right at my periapsis, which would be awesome, just awesome. All right, so now it is the mothership ComSet network coming through. Go ahead and delete that and leave this one up just so that I have an easy way to switch. Oh, look at that. You can actually see both of them coming in at the same time. That's actually kind of neat. And yes, I get it. Thank you. Okay, so this one we're going to say once again, periapsis circularized, please and thank you. And this is actually going to be a lot closer as far as my delta V budget is concerned. All right, so at my periapsis, go ahead and circularize, and that's going to cost us 928 meters per second of delta V. And with all of the little probes kicked off, this thing once again has a full almost 2,000 meters per second of delta V. Each one of those was fairly light, but you know, that weight adds up. Bringing fuel costs fuel and all of that. Tsiolkovsky is a harsh master, I guess. All right, so I think this is actually fine. I'm not worried about the particular inclination of this vessel. It looks like we are at about 90 degrees, which is pretty dang good. I kind of like I'm not sure if this is going to be the kind of thing where I am always going to be parallel to Kerbin or always facing Kerbin like this. I'm not sure if this orbit is always going to be facing Kerbin, but it'd be really neat if it did. Well, it might always face the sun. Where even is Kerbin at this point? Wait, follow the green line. Pshoom! Yeah, so that's actually going to scan in either direction. But in any case, it's going to be relatively far away from anything that could occlude it. So the times that it is occluded should hopefully be very, very rare. All right, so it looks like we wound up, and there's a beautiful shot of Duna. I like that. Let's extend this antenna, get this thing all prepped and ready to roll. So it looks like we are 14 minutes out from this particular burn. So it looks like everything is staggered just a little bit, except for the last one, which I forgot to rename, or I renamed and not sure what happened to this one. So Duna ComSet Network Relay and the Duna ComSet Network, the mothership, are happening roughly at the same time, but that I'm not too worried about that. None of these need super precise orbits yet. The idea is that I am going to be manipulating their orbits over the course of a couple of days or weeks to get them into the precise orbits that I need them to be in. 5-minute burn, really? Yeah, I did not expect these to be 5-minute burns, even with these little ant engines, but I guess I should have known better, huh? All right, well, I'll see you in a couple minutes. All right, we have the first of our satellites safely in their intended orbit. So I'd like to get these two into a roughly equatorial orbit, if only so that I can more easily make sure that they're in perfectly opposite orbits, but we'll see how that goes. Let me... What do I need to do? Do I need to target Duna? I want to see the ascending and descending nodes, but oops, I don't actually have anything, so I guess it's only a relative thing. All right, now it's time to deal with Ike, which I believe is actually throwing a big shadow on Duna, which looks just awesome. You can see it right there, and Jewel hanging out behind it. Ah, that's fantastic. I think what I might want to do is try to manipulate this a little bit, since we should have a lot more control since we're close to this orbit now. Yeah, we're definitely going to want to do that. Let's burn out till we have a periapsis of about 250 kilometers. That seems like a fine distance to be. And then once we get in, periapsis, circularize, and we'll see what we can do about our inclination as we get in here, because we are off by a little bit. All right, we are crossing into Ike's sphere of influence and coming on down into orbit around the large moon as it paints a bullseye on Duna itself. All right, and now we commence our entry burn around Ike. All right, we have a good orbit around Ike, so let's, in a panic, start jumping to the other things that are happening right away. All right, so this one is a little bit more dicey. It's actually starting on its way out from Ike, so we need to kind of catch this before it gets out. The other ones we have a little bit more leeway because obviously Duna's sphere of influence is going to be a lot larger. Okay, so that is sort of close enough. That's going to have to be good enough for what we're doing right now because we have more to catch. All right, so last of the little ones, I think, getting into their orbit around around Duna, as the solar eclipse fades or passes off. All right, so this one is now captured very nicely. So where is this one going to be able to get a better inclination? Once again, we can use Ike as our guide. Kind of get that straightened out. Looks like about here-ish. And something like that. Pop. All right. Last one. All right, so this one is actually going to be a little bit easier just because this engine has a lot more thrust. So let's circularize. All right, so something like that is actually going to be just fine, I think. With just a little bit of the radial there to kind of keep it relatively circular instead of getting wacky and elliptical, because we are off of, we are not in the actual orbit we want to be in, like at the actual altitude, so we're going to need to play with the numbers a little bit, the radial numbers a little bit, to make that actually happen. But this is actually using the LV909, which the Terrier, which has a lot more thrust than those little ant engines, that's for sure, and the thrust-to-weight ratio on this vessel is quite a bit better. So there we go, just about roughly circular at 5,100 kilometers. So that's taken care of. Let's go check on, yes, I know. Let's check on my other probes, because there's all kinds of stuff here, and I just want to make sure that nothing is hurtling out in a way. Because we have Duna Relay 2. There's a Duna Surveyor from a while ago. Oh, looks like that's Surveyor Network Relay, the one that didn't get renamed. And then I have 2 around Ike. So there we go, we've done that. So now let's go ahead and start tweaking their orbits down. I think I'll probably just play with these and I'll show you what I wind up with. So I'll be right back in a moment. If Ike is at 0 degrees inclination, I can just use the ascending node that I would get from, pointing at Ike. So it looks like that's actually worked out and given us an inclination of 0.2, which is good enough for me. That causes that inclination to swing around, and that may not be perfectly 0.0 degree inclination, but that's not actually something I'm very concerned with. So at 0.0 or 0.2 degrees inclination, that's fine. I just want these two probes to be roughly similar so that I can manipulate their orbits a little bit better without having to worry about those additional variables. Because the idea is I want them to be on exact opposite sides, and I want their orbital period to be exactly the same so that they rotate at the same exact speed. So there's going to be a little bit of tweaking of their orbital parameters that I'm going to do. All right, and that actually lines this up so that this is going to happen first because our orbital period is shorter. So we are going to see if I did this right. This would be really cool if it worked. And that's whipping around. And there it passes there. And now I'm coming down. Oh, this is so cool. Oh, this worked just about perfectly. And so now we are very close. So we have just about the same orbital period while I'm at this position. So is slow down our orbit until our orbital period is just about the same. So we're looking for 2 hours and 58 minutes and 18.342 seconds. 2 hours, 58 minutes, 18.342 seconds. Whoops, a little bit fast. Yeah, so this is a very tiny thing that we are trying to nail here. 18.264, 343. There. With 3 degrees or 3 significant figures of precision, we are 3, or is that 4? In any case, we are very close to as much precision as we can get out of Kerbal Engineer in an orbit of the same orbital period. And we take a look at this, and so even though we are slightly off in some of the different orbital parameters, the inclination is different, our periapsis and apoapsis is slightly different, these should stay in the exact same position relative to each other for a very long time. There may be some drift, but I don't think we're ever going to have to worry about that in the length of this series. So there we go. That's what we got done here, and now I'm going to do the same thing with the Duna probes. So 1 day, 0 hours, 14 minutes, 55 and 55.234 seconds. Almost. Up. 287. Flip that around. Ah! Ha! Yes! 1 day, 0 hours, 14 minutes, 55.234 seconds, exactly the same orbital period. There we go. So once again, these two should stay roughly on the same side, and hopefully, I think, this should give us 100% coverage for the entirety of the planet. There are definitely going to be blackout periods, I do know that, but I feel fairly confident that this is going to give us a much larger amount of coverage than I think I've ever done for one of these missions. Usually I just kind of wait until things are facing Kerbin, and that's actually what we do in real life a lot of times. We don't actually have ComSat networks around any other planets, but yeah, so that's really cool. We got this done. Hopefully this all works the way I hope it does. It appears to be sending this 9% signal back to Kerbin rather than bouncing it off of the ComSat network relay. So I'm not sure why it's doing that, and I hope that that's not something I have to be worried about. But that's something that we are going to have to deal with later on, I suppose. I didn't expect this to take me an entire episode, but hopefully you guys found this to be pretty interesting and hopefully a little bit informative as far as how you can set up these sorts of networks for other planets. So that's all the time that we have for this episode. Next time we will be getting down to a landing, perhaps. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and subscribe, and I will see you next time.